So hello everyone. I thought I'd give a real quick demonstration based on yesterday's meeting where the question came up about kind of indirect rates and double dipping. I was just going to send out a spreadsheet, and then I figured people probably want actually a little bit more explanation rather than just a static spreadsheet and then a big wall of text. So the question came up in yesterday's session about kind of indirect rates in multiple projects and why it wouldn't be considered double dipping if you had more than one project. So your indirect rates are actually determined by your overall direct cost for the entire business. So let's go through a real quick example here. So let's say that the only direct cost that your business had was actually two employees, and each employee made $50,000 a year. So that means that your total direct costs are all labor, which is $100,000. Now, let's say that you had rent of $12,000 in a year, utilities of $18,000, and yes, I know these seem like very high numbers, but it was just to have something to make it work. And you have software and subscriptions for $10,000. So those are your indirect costs. Now you add your indirect costs together and you get $40,000. Now to get your rate, you take your indirect cost and divide it by your direct cost, and you get 40%. So that means that when you add up all of your indirect costs, including things like rent, utilities, software, you get $40,000, and your only direct costs are labor. So let's say you have two projects, project one and project two. So on project one, the first person is at 50%, and that's $25,000, and that's a direct charge. And on project two, the same person is at 50%. So, that's another $25,000. Again, that is a direct charge. Now person B is at 70%. So that gives you 35,000. Again, a direct charge. And then on project number two, they're at 30%, and that gives you $15,000. So when you add these together, you see that between project one and project two, you fully covered that person's time, $50,000 in a year. And that makes sense because they're 50% on this one, 50% on this one, gives you 100%. 70% on this one, 30% on this one, it gives you, 100%. So your total cost, direct cost for project one is $60,000, and your total direct cost for project two is $40,000. So if you add these together, you'll see that you get your direct driver, which is $100,000. Now, if you put your indirect rate onto project one of 40%, you're going to get $24,000 in indirect costs. And if you put your indirect rate of 40% on project two, you're going to get $16,000 over indirect cost. Now, when you add these together, you're going to get your full $40,000, because remember, your indirect rate itself is actually driven by your direct cost. Now, if you had more factors in here for your kind of direct cost, or more factors for your indirect cost, that's going to shift the percentage. But at the end of the day, because your indirect rate is driven by your direct cost are the things that like people do for here. And it could be if they're working on a different project, or it could be if there are materials for these, or it could be that if you're selling a different product. So you'll never get over 100%, because this rate here always shifts by what your business is doing, and it shifts by what those direct costs are. So these direct costs are actually driven by things like if you get awards, if you get grants, if you get contracts. At that point, those are new direct costs for your business, which means that your denominator here in this equation is going to go up. So if your indirect costs don't also go up, then of course that means that your rate is going to go down, because it's simple divisional math. So That's why when you're looking at the projects themselves, you're never going to go be able, no matter what you do, unless you use Hollywood style bookkeeping and accounting, to get over 100% of your total indirect costs. Because remember, your indirect costs are driven entirely by this rate, and this rate fluctuates depending on what your direct drivers are, so what your direct costs are. So it's kind of a balancing game. So don't kind of worry about, well, I had this project and this project and this project. I think I'm over. The only way you could ever be over your total indirects is if you shifted this and the people were at more than 100%. So if this person was at, you know, 35,000 for this project, all of a sudden that's 28,000. And well, this wasn't a formula, I just typed it out. But this would actually change this to 44,000. So at that point you go, oh, well, I'm over my indirect rate. Well, and that's because this person now is at 120%. There is no way a person can be at 120%. That is where the audit trail comes in, and that is where the illegality comes in. So, because your rate and your indirects and what you can actually capture in indirect cost are always driven by your direct cost, the only way that this will ever be off from your total for your business itself is if you don't factor your numbers right and somebody's at more than 100% or your materials are at more than 100% use, something has to be over 100%. And so that's why you don't have to worry about kind of that double dipping factor.